Emotional detachment is often misunderstood as coldness, apathy, or the refusal to feel. In philosophy, however, emotional detachment is something far deeper and far more powerful. It is not the absence of emotion, but mastery over it. It is the ability to experience life fully without being enslaved by reactions, expectations, or attachments that steal peace. Across civilizations and centuries, great philosophers reached the same realization through different paths. Suffering increases not because life is cruel, but because the mind clings to what it cannot control. Philosophies that teach emotional detachment do not ask you to escape life. They teach you how to stand firm within it. Stoicism begins with a brutally honest observation. Most of what disturbs us is outside our control. Epictetus, once a slave, taught that freedom does not come from changing the world, but from changing how we relate to it. According to Stoicism, emotions like anger, fear, jealousy, and despair are not caused by events themselves, but by our judgments about those events. Someone insults you, and you feel pain, not because of the insult, but because you decide it has power over your worth. Stoicism teaches emotional detachment by drawing a clear boundary between what belongs to you and what does not. Your opinions, intentions, values, and actions are yours. Everything else, other people's behavior, outcomes, loss, praise, reputation, is not. When you stop demanding control over what is uncontrollable, emotional chaos fades. Detachment here is clarity. You still care, but you do not collapse when reality refuses to obey your desires. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor surrounded by power, wealth, and war, wrote that life is short and fragile, and therefore should not be wasted on emotional excess. He reminded himself daily that people will act selfishly, events will go wrong, bodies will age, and death will arrive without permission. This was not pessimism, it was preparation. Stoicism teaches emotional detachment by removing surprise. When you expect impermanence, loss loses its shock. When you accept human flaws, resentment weakens. Detachment becomes a shield, not a wall. Buddhism approaches emotional detachment through suffering itself. The Buddha did not claim that life is meaningless. He observed that life contains inevitable dissatisfaction. The root of this suffering, he taught, is attachment. Attachment to pleasure, identity, people, outcomes, and even to our own thoughts. We suffer because we cling to what changes. We demand permanence from an impermanent world. Buddhism teaches detachment not by suppression, but by awareness. Through mindfulness, one learns to observe emotions without becoming them. Anger arises, but you do not say, "I am angry." You say, "Anger is present." This subtle shift breaks identification. The emotion appears, peaks, and fades like a wave. You are no longer drowning in it. Buddhist detachment is deeply compassionate. It does not reject love. It purifies it. When you are attached, love becomes fear, loss, abandonment, betrayal. When you are detached, love becomes freedom. You care without possession. You give without demand. Detachment here is not withdrawal from the world, but release from illusion. The illusion that anything can be owned forever. The illusion that happiness comes from clinging. By accepting impermanence fully, Buddhism teaches emotional detachment as peace with reality. Taoism teaches detachment through harmony rather than struggle. The Tao is the natural flow of existence, effortless and spontaneous. According to Taoist philosophy, emotional suffering arises when we resist this flow, when we force outcomes, overthink, or impose rigid expectations on life. Lao Tzu taught that softness overcomes hardness, that yielding outlasts resistance. Emotional detachment in Taoism comes from non-attachment to control. The Taoist does not fight reality. They move with. When success comes, they do not cling. When failure arrives, they do not despair. They understand that both are temporary expressions of the same unfolding process. Taoism teaches that emotional extremes come from imbalance. When you label experiences as absolutely good or absolutely bad, you trap yourself. Detachment is achieved by seeing opposites as interconnected. Joy contains the seed of sorrow. Loss creates space for growth. When you stop emotionally clinging to one side, the other loses its power over you. Detachment here is flexibility. Like water, the detached mind adapts without breaking. Hindu philosophy, particularly through the Bhagavad Gita, presents emotional detachment as action without attachment to results. Krishna teaches Arjuna that suffering arises not from action itself, but from obsession with outcomes. You act, but you demand a specific result. When reality delivers something else, pain follows. Detachment in this tradition does not mean inaction. It means disciplined engagement. You perform your duty fully, sincerely, and skillfully, but you surrender the fruits. Success does not inflate you. Failure does not crush you. Both are offerings to the larger order of existence. This philosophy recognizes that emotions become destructive when they are tied to ego. When your happiness depends on recognition, control, or reward, you become fragile. Detachment dissolves this fragility by anchoring identity and effort, not outcome. You do what is right because it is right, not because of what you will gain. Emotional detachment here is inner sovereignty. Existential philosophy approaches detachment differently. It begins by accepting the absence of inherent meaning. Thinkers like Sartre and Camus argued that life does not come with built-in purpose. At first, this realization creates anxiety and despair. But beyond that despair lies freedom. If meaning is not given, it can be chosen. Emotional detachment in existentialism comes from refusing to let external systems, society, tradition, expectation define your worth. When you accept responsibility for creating your own values, you detach from the emotional pressure of approval. Camus described life as absurd. Humans search for meaning in a universe that offers none. Emotional suffering increases when we demand answers that do not exist. Detachment comes from rebellion, not against life, but against false hopes. You stop emotionally depending on guarantees. You live fully despite uncertainty. Detachment here is courage. You feel deeply, but you do not lie to yourself to escape discomfort. Even ancient cynicism, often misunderstood, taught radical emotional detachment. Philosophers like Diogenes rejected social status, wealth, and reputation, believing that emotional suffering is amplified by artificial desires. When you need less, fewer things can hurt you. Cynic detachment is simplicity taken to its extreme. By stripping life to essentials, emotional dependence on external validation disappears. Across all these philosophies, a common thread emerges. Emotional detachment is not indifference. It is freedom from unconscious bondage. It is the refusal to let transient things dictate inner peace. It is clarity over chaos, awareness over impulse, acceptance over resistance. Emotionally detached individuals still feel pain, love, joy, and grief. The difference is that emotions pass through them rather than rule them. They respond instead of react. They understand that the mind amplifies suffering by storytelling, by replaying the past, fearing the future, and demanding certainty. Detachment silences this unnecessary noise. For a philosophy video, this message matters deeply. In a world addicted to stimulation, outrage, validation, and emotional extremes, detachment is revolutionary. It teaches that peace is not found by controlling others, fixing everything, or escaping pain, but by mastering perception. When you detach emotionally, you stop being a hostage to circumstances. You become stable in chaos, calm in loss, humble in success, and resilient in failure. These philosophies do not promise a painless life. They promise a life where pain does not define you, where loss does not destroy you, where fear does not paralyze you. Emotional detachment is not about becoming less human. It is about becoming unbreakable.